Have you ever looked up at the night sky and thought, are we really all alone out here? Well, tonight we're diving into a story that might just convince you we aren't. The Phoenix Lights.
Ooh.
It's one of the most documented and mysterious UFO sightings ever.
Yeah.
I'm John Doe,
I'm Jane Doe.
and welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know the drill? We take all your amazing source material,
Mm-hmm.
and we deep dive right into it.
Yeah.
And this one's really cool because we have a ton of stuff to go over.
It's a big one, this one.
First-hand accounts,
Yeah.
official reports, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and it's from such a wide range of people, too. It's not just a few people, out in the desert somewhere. We've got pilots, we have politicians, we have military personnel,
Yeah.
all saying they saw something they really can't explain.
It's crazy, right? So let's set the scene. It's March 13th, 1997,
Okay.
a regular night in Phoenix, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
But then something crazy happens. Our thousands of people across the state start seeing these weird lights in the sky.
Right, and there are two separate events here. You've got the triangular formation of lights seen moving across the state first, and then later you've got a bunch of lights just hovering over Phoenix.
So in one of the sources of family, the Lays described seeing that first event.
Uh-huh.
They saw this huge V-shaped object with lights embedded in it. They said it was like a 60-degree carpenter's square, just floating silently through the night.
Yeah, that's a pretty crazy image, isn't it? And they weren't the only ones who saw this triangular formation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actor and pilot Kurt Russell.
No way.
He saw it while he was flying a plane that night.
What?
He even reported it to air traffic control.
Wait, Kurt Russell, Snake Plissken himself saw these lights?
I know, right?
That's wild.
I know, and it really lends some weight to it, right? I mean,
Right.
he's a seasoned pilot. He knows what's up there.
Yeah.
And he's saying he saw something really strange.
Wow. Okay, so we've got these lights putting on a show over Arizona. First set of lights through his telescope.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, they're just airplanes.
Yeah, and this is where things get a little messy,
Yeah.
because for that second sighting, the stationary lights over Phoenix.
Okay.
The official explanation is that they were flares dropped by A-10 Warthog aircraft in a training exercise.
Okay, so we've got one witness saying it's airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the Air Force saying it's flares.
Mm-hmm.
Seems pretty open and shut, right?
Not quite.
Oh.
There are a lot of problems with both of those explanations. First off, a lot of witnesses, like the Lays,
Uh-huh.
they said the lights were moving in formations that wouldn't be normal for flares.
Mm-hmm.
Or even airplanes, for that matter. Some even said they saw this giant silent craft behind the lights.
Hold on, a silent craft like something out of a movie.
That's what some people are saying. And it gets even weirder because remember that first sighting?
Yeah, the one Mitch Stanley said was airplanes.
Yeah, well, the Air National Guard at first, they said there weren't any aircraft in the area at that time.
Wait, so if there were no military planes up there, what do people see?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated when you consider what the governor at the time, Fife Symington, had to say about it.
Governor Simon, didn't he kind of make fun of the whole UFO thing?
He did. He even had someone dress up as an alien for a press conference, just joking around about it.
Yeah.
Until years later.
Okay, what happened?
Years after it happened, Symington publicly admitted he had seen the craft that night. He said it was unlike anything he'd ever seen and that it was definitely otherworldly.
Whoa. Talk about a plot twist. The governor who made fun of the Phoenix Lights ends up being a witness himself.
Right.
This is good.
And, Symington said his office reached out to authorities to ask about it,
Mm-hmm.
but they got nothing back. You'd think the governor seeing something weird in the sky, they'd want to, give him an explanation.
But nothing.
Total silence. And that's not the only time the authorities have been a little shady about this.
Yeah.
One of our sources tells about an account from an airman at Luke Air Force Base. He says that the base scrambled F-15s
Mm-hmm.
to check out this near miss between a Cessna
Uh-huh.
and these mystery lights. And get this, the F-15 pilot who came back was scared to death.
Whoa.
He had no idea what he saw, scared to death. That's pretty intense.
It is.
And of course, the Air Force denied this whole F-15 thing ever happened.
Of course.
But this is starting to feel like more than just a few flares, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you think about the fact that in 2017, the Pentagon admitted they've been running a secret program,
Mm-hmm.
investigating UFOs for years.
Exactly. It just adds another layer to the whole mystery. If the Pentagon's taking UFOs seriously enough to have a whole program for it, maybe these lights weren't so easy to explain after all.
This is mind-blowing. I'm hooked already. What do you think so far? Are we looking at a government cover-up?
Or could this be something really out of this world?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but the official explanations, they just don't really hold up when you look at them closely, like the flares theory. One of the sources we have mentions someone who saw the lights, and they described them as perfectly uniform, with no variation from one edge to the other and no glow.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like any flare I've ever seen.
It doesn't sound like any flare I've ever seen either. And this wasn't just some, random person watching either, right?
Right, this was a special effects expert, someone who knows light.
Yeah.
And they even ruled out things like lasers and holograms and aircraft lights.
So if it wasn't flares, and it wasn't airplanes, and it wasn't anything we know, what are we left with? I mean, what could possibly explain those lights?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And it's important to remember that even if we just said, okay, fine, the second sighting was flares, it still doesn't explain that massive silent craft people saw in the first event. Like when the Lees talked about seeing a giant carpenter square.
I do remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not something you easily forget.
Exactly. And then there's the whole thing with how the authorities reacted or didn't react. It's just really suspicious.
You mean how the Air National Guard first said there wasn't any activity and then changed their story? And how they just completely ignored Governor Symington?
All of it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't add up. You've got the governor of the state, a former military pilot himself, saying he saw a UFO, and they don't even respond. Like, what possible reason could they have for being so quiet about it?
It's like they're trying to pretend the whole thing never happened. But why? Are they worried about freaking people out?
It's possible. Imagine if the government actually came out and said, yeah, aliens are real and we don't know what they want.
Oh, man. Yeah. I can only imagine the headlines. It would be total chaos.
Right. But I think there might be a deeper reason, too, something about control and power. If we admit that there are things out there that we don't understand, things that might even be more advanced than us, it challenges our whole view of the world. And I think some people in power, they're not comfortable with that idea. They want to keep up this image that they have everything under control.
So they downplay or just straight up deny things like the Phoenix Lights to avoid saying, hey, there are things out there we can't explain.
It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And then we have that story from the airmen at Luke Air Force Base.
Right.
A Cessna almost hits the lights. F-15s are scrambled to investigate, and the pilot comes back scared to death. I mean, what does that tell you?
It tells me that whatever those pilots saw, it wasn't something they were expecting, and it wasn't something they were allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, the Air Force said the whole thing never happened.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what really happened that night.
It does. And like we talked about before, the Pentagon admitted they've got a secret program for investigating UFOs. So we know they're taking this stuff seriously. What if the Phoenix Lights was one of the things that made them start that program in the first place?
Okay, wow. Now that's a thought. So we have hundreds of witnesses, really compelling stories. The authorities are being shady about it, and the government's been looking into UFOs this whole time. It's a lot to process.
It is. But it's important to remember that even with all of this, we still don't have a definitive answer. The Phoenix Lights is still a mystery, a puzzle with missing pieces.
But maybe that's part of what makes it so interesting, right? The fact that it makes us question what we know and think about possibilities that we might have just dismissed before.
Absolutely. And even though we might never know for sure what those lights were, the event itself had a big impact. It started a national conversation about UFOs and the idea of alien life. And it made people start to question the official stories we're told.
So even without a clear answer, the Phoenix Lights forced us to confront the unknown and consider different explanations. And that's pretty powerful in itself.
It is. It reminds us that there's still so much we don't understand about the universe.
Speaking of not understanding, there have been so many theories trying to explain those lights. Some are more believable than others.
That's true. We've mentioned some of them already, but I think it would be good to really dig into some of the most popular ones, just to give us an idea of the range of possibilities people have come up with.
Okay, let's do it. Let's look at some of these theories and see which ones hold up. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah.
And, man, it's a real mystery. You've got thousands of witnesses, a silent, giant craft, a government that's not saying much.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what's really out there, doesn't it?
It really does. And despite that official explanation about the flares, there are still so many other theories out there trying to make sense of the Phoenix Lights.
Okay, so let's get into those. What are some of the most popular ones?
Well, one theory is that the lights were actually some kind of secret military aircraft.
Oh, okay.
Maybe like a stealth bomber or some other technology we don't know about.
So the "it's us, but we're not telling you" theory.
Exactly. This theory basically says the government has all this advanced stuff that they're not ready to show the world. It could explain why the Air National Guard said they had nothing to do with it at first.
Yeah, that makes sense. But wouldn't a secret plane avoid flying over places where people live? It seems risky to test something like that, where so many people could see it.
You'd think so, right? Unless maybe they were testing some kind of cloaking technology and it didn't work right, or maybe it was a test flight that went wrong. There are a lot of possibilities.
True, and we know the Pentagon had that secret program looking into UFOs, so maybe they were testing something unusual that night. But wouldn't they have admitted it by now?
Hmm.
I mean, wouldn't it be better to say, okay, it was us, we messed up, than to have all these crazy theories going around?
Maybe, but then they'd have to explain what they were testing, and that might be something they really don't want to talk about.
All right, so secret military tech is one theory. What else is out there?
Well, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, you have the alien theory.
Ah, yes. The good old extraterrestrial visitation.
Right. And it does seem to fit. The descriptions of a huge silent craft lights doing weird things and no explanation that makes sense. It's like a classic UFO sighting.
I can see why people would think that. But is there any real evidence to support it?
Sadly, no. And that's the problem with a lot of UFO cases. It all comes down to what people say they saw. And we know memories can be fuzzy.
Yeah, but we're talking about hundreds of witnesses here. And some of them seem pretty believable, like Governor Symington.
That's true, but even people you trust can be mistaken. Memory is tricky. It can be influenced by all sorts of things, like stress or just time passing.
So you're saying we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. We need to really look at the evidence and think about all the possible explanations.
All right, fair enough. So we've got secret military stuff and we've got aliens. Any other theories out there?
There are a couple, but they're not as popular. Some people think the lights might have been natural phenomena like ball lightning or some kind of weird weather thing.
Oh, okay. So something that could create these strange light effects that people just misinterpreted.
Right. It's possible, but it seems kind of hard to believe that it could explain something as big and complicated as what people described.
Yeah, I agree. What about those more far out theories?
You mean like interdimensional beings or time travelers?
Exactly. Those always seem to come up in these conversations.
They do. And they're fun to think about, but there's no proof to back them up.
So where does that leave us? We've got all these theories, but no real answers.
That's the thing about the Phoenix Lights. It's this mystery that keeps us thinking and wondering.
It's like a puzzle, and we're missing a few pieces.
Maybe. But maybe the real takeaway here is that it's okay to not have all the answers. Maybe it's the mystery itself that keeps us looking up and exploring.
I like that. Well, you've given us a lot to think about. And who knows, maybe someday we'll finally solve the mystery of the Phoenix Lights.
Maybe. But until then, it reminds us that there's so much we still don't know about the universe. And that's pretty exciting.
Well said. And that's all the time we have for this deep dive into the Phoenix Lights. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast for more deep dives into all sorts of cool topics. And as always, thanks for listening.